children are part of the family, and they're not part of the marriage itself.
Welcome to Shoot Straight Parenting Podcast, where we talk about how to aim high, shoot straight, and launch children for success.
I'm Ted.
And I'm Jen. And today we are talking about the solar system.
Did you say solar system?
Yes, the solar system. It's kind of like elementary school science day. Moms and dads, just like the planets orbit around the sun, in your family, something is the center, and something revolves around that center. And the question that we want to talk about today is, what's the center of your family? Is it your marriage or is it your kids? So I got married when I was very, very young. I was still a teenager. And most of what I learned from that marriage was the don't do it that way kind of lesson. But I will never forget what my grandmother told me when she found out that I was getting married. I remember being in her kitchen and she said, Jennifer, she always called us by our full names, never any nicknames. Like she was grandmother and we were always Jennifer and Timothy. And if your first name was too short, she would call you by your middle name too. My other brother was Brett Michael. Multi-syllabic names. They were the only ones that held value to her. Jennifer, she said, your relationship with your husband must be the center of your marriage. I didn't really understand it at the time, right? I didn't have kids. I was 19, but I do now. She was just saying that the healthy, strong marriage, it has to be a priority in that relationship. You know, she had 5 kids. Her marriage lasted until she and my grandfather passed away. And the products of that equation, right, the marital equation, they can't replace the original sum.
So, okay, hold on. I get what you're saying, and I agree with it. But isn't it supposed to be a podcast on parenting, not marriage counseling?
Okay. Yes. But what did I just say? Kids are the product of a healthy marriage. And if you're going to have healthy kids, you have to make sure the thing that produces them is healthy too.
For sure. So when I think about this, I think about when you sit down on an airplane and they go through the safety directions on the airplane that tell you to put your oxygen mask on before helping others do so. It's so easy to fall into the habit of focusing all of your attention on children and forgetting the best way to raise good kids, do so with a healthy marriage. So this is not to say, and don't take me the wrong way, that single parents are unable to raise good kids. But they also must focus on their own self-care. Yeah. They have to be taking care of themselves before they can really effectively provide everything necessary for their children to thrive.
Yeah, and look, we understand that not everyone who listens or who is a parent is married. In general, most parents, they are married, or they at least want to model a healthy relationship for their kids, and that's what we're focused on today.
You know, children are only around for a relatively short period of time, whatever it is, 18, 20 years.
You mean around in your house?
Yes, living at home. But if a marriage is successful, it'll last much longer than that. So what happens when children grow up and move out and an unhealthy marriage is left behind?
I can't wait for our kids to be gone and to just be you and me in the house. But I have firsthand seen marriages that have fallen apart just a year or two after the kids flew the nest because their marriages were empty.
Yeah, empty nest divorce. And Speaking of that, in terms of the kids moving out and us being alone, I can't wait to walk around naked with you.
Oh my God, stop it. They are called empty nest divorces. And our kids just, by the way, signed off. They're not listening any longer. But the data shows that the rate of divorce among people aged 50 and older, which is a pretty typical age for empty nesters. I mean, we're both about to turn 50 and our kids are leaving the house. But back in the 1990s, or actually prior to 1990s, it was about 9% of all divorces happened in those empty nest years. And by the 2020s, that had jumped to 36%. So that's a huge surge.
Sure is.
So what on earth could be causing so many more marriages to fail after the kids leave the house?
So most marriages come to be because two people fell in love. They wanted nothing else than to be with each other every moment of every day. But then come kids, and then come commitments, jobs. All of these things get in the way of that, what was an initial desire, and basically drive a wedge between married couples, eat away at that desire to be together every moment of every day. So with all of these other things going on, if you don't communicate effectively, agree to disagree, cop a feel whenever possible,
Yeah, you do that.
that wedge will be driven deeper and deeper and deeper.
I know there are exceptions, right? I personally don't know any marriages that didn't start out as healthy, flourishing, madly in love marriages, but obviously there are shotgun marriages that maybe should never take place, or arranged marriages, certainly in parts of the world. But in general, most marriages start off, people are madly in love. But at some point, the focus just kind of shifts. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You wake up in the morning, the baby is already crying. There's no easing into the day when you're a parent. It has already started. You're just kind of waking up into it. So one of you takes diaper duty, the other one jumps in the shower. You've got this routine down. You go downstairs. One of you is making breakfast. One of you is packing lunch. All the while, you're reminding each other of the day's duties. I got a parent-teacher conference at 2 o'clock. You got dance practice at 5, right? Can you pick up a gift for the birthday party sleepover this weekend? Oh, I forgot. You've got that evening meeting. Okay. I'll get the gift tomorrow during soccer practice. Then the kids go to school. The parents go to work. Staying home with kids is definitely work. And then the evening rolls around and it all happens in reverse, right? You start talking about the logistics. How did the conference go? How was dance practice? Did you remember to RSVP for that party that we were supposed to go to? You kind of want to connect. You start to ask each other about how your day was. But what happens? The kids always interrupt. Somebody interrupts to show you your picture and you start exclaiming about how beautiful it is, and then you have to go put it on the fridge, and then a kid needs help with homework and you sit down to do homework, and a couple of hours later you crawl into bed and you realize that you never heard about what his day was like. You never told him about your day, and you can't remember the last time that you actually kissed your husband.
Wow. Now I'm extremely tired and I have a little bit of a nervous tick. But yeah, through what you just explained, your marriage becomes all about transactions and really nothing about the relationship.
Yeah, it's logistics. It's logistics and transactions for sure. And it's not just easy to fall into the habit, but it's necessary, right? It's necessary to figure out the logistics of kids and finances and events and all the other stuff that goes along with life. I totally get it. I mean, we still have it, right? We have a family calendar. I'm checking it, and I think there were 31 events on a day last week.
Wow.
Most of those were missing homework assignments, but regardless, there were still 31 events. But it is absolutely vital that you prioritize and elevate your relationship with your spouse.
But you can do both if you are intentional. And there's nothing wrong with activities for kids. But if you're not careful, those activities become a replacement for really that true, meaningful connection.
Oh, that's pretty good. So there's totally nothing wrong with having your kids in activities. There's tons of studies that show that organized sports and the arts are really good for child development. But I think it's so important to remember that whenever you say yes to one thing, you are saying no to something else. And that's just the reality. And you've got them in 2 or 3 organized things at the same time. You're probably saying no to some relational aspect of your marriage.
I know you said it's okay to do, and it is okay to do, but kids don't have to be in different activities every second of every day. I remember back, Jen, when I played soccer, I was pretty good and played in the Towns League, which was only so good. And I wanted to play on what you would call today a travel league, but It was in, it was 2 towns over. And my mother flat out said, no, I am not spending my time to drive on a regular basis 2 towns over. And of course, at the time, I thought she was just the meanest mother there ever was. But I see it now.
But that's how all moms in the 1980s were.
Yeah, okay, point.
Look, what is right for our family is going to look different for yours. So
Sure.
We had a rule that they could do one activity at a time. And when they were in elementary school, they only got to do one activity a year. Now, that was our family rule. A lot of that was because it just logistically didn't make any sense, especially when I was a single mom, to be able to do more than that. I couldn't afford it either. That's not going to be what fits best for your family. It's about agreeing together as a couple, what's the boundary? And, ask your spouse the question, do you feel prioritized, right? Do you feel like I'm as important to you as these kids are?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really great question to ask.
Yeah, and remember what the subject of this podcast was. It was about building up the marriage.
Yeah.
Right? Building up the marriage so that you continue to focus on each other. Doesn't mean you can't focus on your children or should focus on your children. And if you think about it, maintaining a healthy marriage really has nothing to do with children. Children are part of the family, and they're not part of the marriage itself. But, when we think about children, children emulate what we do, what we say, and how we act. And doing things in a way that represent unity, saying things respectfully and consistently, and modeling care and love for each other is the most important thing about setting the example that children can then emulate.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. But what I'm talking about when I talk about elevating your marriage, it's more than just setting a good example of how you talk to and treat each other. Our kids need to see that the marriage itself, that relationship, is the priority. Being intentional to show them, and not just show them, but being intentional to your spouse to show that the other person in the marriage matters. Think about it. We do that with our kids all the time.
Yeah.
We stop what we are doing to prioritize them. We exalt our kids' actions. Like, when's the last time your kids brought you something and you were like, oh, that's not very good? Right? I mean, okay, maybe I would, but most moms are like, you did a great job. And we stop and we praise them and we frame every piece of artwork and we make sure we show up for every single game. And that is awesome. I mean, that's being a great parent, and there's nothing wrong with building up your kids. But are you building up your spouse? Are you stopping what you're doing in your regular day to prioritize them? Is prioritizing your spouse 3 times a year for Mother's Day and birthday and Christmas?
Yeah, it's not
or is
enough.
it every day, right? If you have allowed your kids to come between you, the kids become the glue. And if the kids are the only glue holding a couple together, of course the marriage is going to fall apart when the children launch. Okay, so we have established how important it is to prioritize your marriage. Be an example of this healthy marriage relationship to your kids, and just make sure that, like, we, the parents, we are the son that our kids are looking up to. They're not the son that we revolve around.
Yeah, right.
So how do we actually do that? How do we keep our marriage as important as the kids and all their stuff?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to be intentional. Generally speaking, you don't have to nurture relationships with your children. Blood runs deep there, and there's a chemical connection there that negates much of the need for regular maintenance. There's no blood between married couples, so you must be intentional about working on the relationship.
Okay, so maybe in some parts of the country, let's not assume that there's no blood between married couples.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Normally, there's no blood between married couples.
Just saying.
But blood relationships typically last forever and don't need much intentionality. There's an inherent desire to stay connected. But other relationships in our lives, like friendships and most certainly marriages, require work, and sometimes really hard work.
Yeah. So the obvious way to be intentional is to go on regular dates, right? Have a date night, a regularly scheduled event, something you do together. But that's not always easy when the kids are little. Or if you have children with separation anxiety, I don't know. Do you remember we had that?
Oh, I do remember that.
Or if you've got kids with special needs, right? With us, it was just, we had so many kids. It was almost impossible and super expensive to get someone to watch all of them. So we did not have regularly scheduled date nights. But one of the ways that we were intentional when the kids were little, we had kid-free zones in the house. Seriously. We had a room that we called the grown-up room. Actually, we still call it the grown-up room. I'm looking at it right now. And kids, they were not allowed to go in that room until like 4 years ago. When we needed to just go sit and have a conversation without being interrupted, we would go into the grown-up room and be alone. Well, kind of.
Yeah, there are no doors on that room, so sometimes the kids would just stand right outside the doorway and stare at us. Ugh. But our bedroom is also off limits, and that does have a door.
Yeah. So the bedroom thing was a little bit tough for me at first. I have to be honest, when Ted and I first met, I had just weaned the last child. She's 14 now, and I was used to always having kids in my room. Kids slept in bed with me. They would get up in the middle of the night. I didn't have good sleepers. And I really hated the idea when we moved into this house that they could not reach me in the middle of the night if they needed me. But in retrospect, I agree. It was a really good decision. I mean, it created boundaries that were necessary. And I think it kind of also reinforced the idea to them that our marriage is exalted and our bedroom is sacred. And I know those are kind of dramatic words, but the kids still won't go in there without asking. And it's just been this quiet oasis in the middle of a really loud house.
But another way to be intentional is to make sure you talk about something other than the kids.
Yeah, or the logistics of being parents.
Yeah. Yeah, and not just about work either. Remember the conversations you had when you were dating, like wanting to learn everything about the other person.
Yeah, I mean, some of us probably started dating before cell phones. You would take the phone when you were in high school and go climb down the basement stairs as far away from your brothers and sisters as you could and talk for like 2 hours.
Yeah, you would go as far as the cord would stretch.
As far as the cord would stretch. So we actually met, Ted and I did meet in the texting world. And I think we would text like 1,000 times a day. I mean, it was insane when we were first dating, right? We did. We just wanted to know everything about each other. And even now, I know it might sound silly, but I still keep little notes of things that I want to talk to you about, mostly because my brain doesn't work the way it did when I first met you. But if you're traveling and we can't connect as often during the day, so Ted travels internationally a lot. And so, you know, he might be in a different time zone and we might only be able to connect for 20 minutes a day. So I just make a little list, and it's not just the logistic stuff. Oh, we need to do this. If I see something funny or something really pissed me off and I want his input on it, or, you know, I want him to coach me on something, I mean, I will write things on that list just so that we can have those little points of connection. You didn't have to try at it when you were dating. The world was endless. We wanted to know everything about each other. And what happens is, you know, you're together for a decade or a couple of decades and you feel like you've reached the end of each other. You haven't. You just have to be a little more intentional.
Yeah, and it's great when I'm, say, in the Middle East and I wake up in the morning and you're just sitting down at the end of the day and you want to offload on me and I'm trying to get ready for my day. But no,
You know, I was thinking about something else that we used to do when the kids were little. So not too often, maybe once a month, usually on a Friday, we'd feed the kids something easy, like frozen pizza. And then after they went to bed, I would make us a much nicer dinner and we would just sit and eat dinner together. It was like a date.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it vividly. And it was way cheaper than going out to eat. And believe it or not, the kids thought it was a huge treat to have frozen pizza. So it was a win-win. I wish it was still the case.
So what are some other ways that you can think of to be intentional about keeping your marriage prioritized and making your spouse feel elevated?
Well, we're not going to get too deep into that now, but you should probably be doing whatever you can to remain physically attractive to each other as well.
Okay. So, wow, you're going to go there?
I think you have to. Way too often, marriages cause people to get lazy.
That's true.
I mean, it's happened to me in some ways with certain things, and it's something that you have to work at. And listen, I think people feel like they don't have to maintain themselves the way that they did when they were single. Huge mistake, in my opinion. I know. We're all not going to look in our 50s the way we did in our 20s, but effort alone is pretty damn admirable.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, actually. And I know it's probably a little bit controversial to say, but I think a lot of marriages can lose their edge because we do stop being attracted to each other. And yes, a lot of that has to do with tone and the types of things you talk about and not being intentional. But, you know, physical attractiveness matters. And when you were dating, your spouse saw the absolute best version of you. Do they still? I mean, it's not about perfection, but it is about showing the other person that they are worth your effort and really your best effort. I know that's easier said than done. When the kids are little, I get it. I mean, you're not going to put on the nicest thing you have when you've got a baby and a toddler and a 5-year-old and you're homeschooling, right? But one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from an older mom was just like change my shirt before my husband got home, right? Especially when you're nursing. Like, I know that sounds silly, but make a little effort. You can tell when someone is making an effort to look attractive to you.
But it's a two-way street. I think men should always do what they can to stay in somewhat decent shape and just not let everything go. My advice there is to watch how much you eat and drink. I mean, if I'm not working out, I always watch what I eat. It's really just about having a bit of discipline. But like I said, it's a two-way street. So if you're not both on the same page with similar desires to remain at least somewhat attractive to the other person, it could go south pretty quick.
Yeah. And again, I mean, we're obviously focused on physical right here. A lot of people don't want to talk about that because it's uncomfortable, because it's not easy to watch what we eat and to exercise. And it doesn't matter as much as being loving and respectful and kind and patient with each other, but it still matters. Along with that, I mean, I think another way to keep the other person elevated and making them feel that way is to verbally appreciate them. Make sure that you're saying it and compliment each other, right? It's so easy to forget to do that. But like when you tell me that I look pretty, it just totally makes my day.
Yeah, I know you appreciate physical accolades, but what you like even more is when I tell you that I appreciate you or that I'm proud of you. You do react a little bit differently in a very good way. I haven't always been good at saying those things because I feel as though I have to be a bit vulnerable to say those things, but I do mean it. And I think most people think it often, they just don't verbalize it enough.
Yeah, that's true. And I know one thing that you have told me, how much you appreciate that I call you handsome. And I will say cute sometimes, but handsome is something different, right? It's manly. It's true. I mean, you're very handsome. And I say that in front of the kids. You know, now it's just kind of become part of my vernacular, but it was actually not supernatural to me either when we first got together, but it's something that we've been intentional about. And the cool thing about practicing something is that it can become natural to you. So, you know, especially if you feel like there's this distance in your marriage and man, we haven't talked like that in 7 years. So why would I start now? Just start, just practice. Who cares? Like Ted said, allow yourself to be vulnerable and see what happens and what kind of is brought back and what comes back to life.
Yeah. And the other thing is some of these things start to become a habit. And I want to be careful there because saying something becomes a habit could mean like you continue doing it and not meaning it.
Right. It could sound almost manipulative.
Yeah, right. And I don't mean that, but a simple thing, Jen, like just mentioning to you every night that you cook dinner that, hey, thanks for cooking dinner, right? And it's a little bit habitual for me now, but I'm no less thankful now than I was when you first did it. And I get a physical reaction from Jen every time I say that. So those things matter.
Yeah, it does. You know, we've talked about ways that we can be intentional about spending time together and about elevating the other person. I know I've said that a lot, but I think it's really kind of the best way to express how to show your spouse that you love them, that it's love in action is to elevate them. And I would say the last thing is something I mentioned earlier. When was the last time you hugged your spouse for more than 10 seconds? When was the last time you kissed? Seriously, not just a peck goodbye, really kissed. When was the last time you flirted with your spouse? So just the other night at dinner, we were talking, I think we were actually arguing, right? You know, a Ted Jenn argument, which isn't really an argument.
Okay, I was just going to say, our arguments are usually pretty constructive.
They're usually about how he mispronounces words.
Sorry, Massachusetts peeps.
But I just couldn't stop grinning because he's sitting there talking about something, but he has this beard right now and it's really cute. Like, it's very handsome. So I just start grinning at him. And then he starts grinning at me. And all of a sudden, our 16-year-old is like, are you guys flirting? Are you guys flirting? Why do you always have to flirt in front of us? But
for the record, it sounded like you said, I have a beer right now.
Oh.
Beard.
Facial
hair.
Facial hair. Anyway, listen, when you have kids, especially when the kids are little, physical affection, sometimes it's not just that you don't have desire for it. You literally don't have time. You don't have the energy. You just want to sleep. But do it anyway. Sex is the great panacea. It is a reset. It's a refresh. It's just a good reminder of why you stepped into this thing called marriage in the first place. You need to prioritize it.
The kids have definitely signed off.
Definitely. So schedule it if you have to. And listen, like if that just seems...
Schedule it?
Yeah, we have put it in the schedule before.
Okay,
in years past.
No. Maybe you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the planner. Maybe scheduling it might be a little bit too far, but schedule time to be intentional without an agenda. So one of the best ways to model a healthy marriage or a healthy relationship, not everybody's married, it's to elevate it. Let the marriage be the center of your family, not your kids.
The foundation,
Yeah.
really. It's got to be there and healthy before you can set your kids up for success.
Yeah. Be intentional. Make time for each other. Carve out a space just for you, even if it means a room in your house that's called the grown-up room, right? Carve out a space. Have agenda-free conversations. Compliment and appreciate each other out loud. Give your spouse your best. Don't let your physical affection become routine. Just hold on to that hug a little bit longer. Flirt a little bit. Go in for the long kiss. And let the kids see it all. It's so good for them. They will leave the nest one day. Put the effort in now to ensure that your empty nest years are just as full and just as fun and just as flourishing as those first few pre-kids years were.